December 24, 1979, Soviet tanks rumbled into Kabul, rolling across dusty streets under a gray winter sky. On the surface, it seemed like just another invasion. But deep behind the lines, superpowers saw opportunity, a chance to experiment with strategy and influence. Declassified U.S. reports from the Cold War era later revealed this invasion laid the groundwork for Operation Cyclone, a secret CIA program that funneled billions to local fighters. From that moment, Afghanistan wasn't just a battlefield, it became a laboratory for global power. Welcome to Uncovered Time. In the ruins and hills of Afghanistan, superpowers crafted new warfare methods. From CIA-funded guerrilla training to Soviet counterinsurgency, every tactic was tested in real time. As CIA memos later revealed, Mujahideen were armed and trained under Operation Cyclone's covert protocols. In the 1980s, the United States launched one of the most expensive covert operations in history, Operation Cyclone. Through this program, the CIA funneled over $3 billion to Afghan fighters. As confirmed in U.S. congressional archives and Cold War histories, this was more than support it, was experimentation in guerrilla warfare, using Afghanistan as the proving ground. The Soviets, too, began testing new methods. From psychological warfare to chemical sprays in rural valleys, tactics were refined through live deployment. Reports from Human Rights Watch and declassified Russian sources reveal that villages became sites of unfiltered trial under Afghan civilians, the unwilling participants. In the 1990s, while the world forgot Afghanistan, intelligence agencies didn't. When Al-Qaeda set up base camps, the U.S. resumed surveillance testing early drone prototypes. As reported in The Intercept and Washington Post, Afghanistan became the birthplace of armed drone warfare. It was quiet, unseen, but experimental. By 2001, after 9/11s, the lab reopened, this time with full force. The U.S. invasion wasn't just about chasing terrorists. It became a chance to field test technologies, tactics, and alliances on a scale not seen since Vietnam. According to journalist Anand Gopal, Afghanistan was turned into an endless war experiment, and no experiment was off limits. One of the earliest tests was the deployment of precision-guided bunker buster bombs in the caves of Tora Bora. According to the Washington Post, these weapons had been modified and perfected in Nevada test sites, then unleashed on Afghanistan's mountains. These were not just attacks, but it wasn't just bombs. The battlefield also became a testing site for military psychology. As confirmed in Foreign Policy magazine and leaked Pentagon reports, Hearts and Minds campaigns were launched to study civilian response to propaganda, aid, and fear. Every interaction became data. Every village, a human laboratory. The drones returned more advanced than ever. Between 2004 and 2010, the U.S. drone fleet expanded tenfold. Military review confirms that Afghanistan became the command center of America's unmanned warfare. Every strike recorded, every movement tracked. The sky itself was turned into a feedback loop. In eastern Afghanistan, the CIA ran its own parallel war. Secret bases, tribal militias, informant networks. According to investigative reporting by The Intercept and Wired. These sites became microlabs for covert warfare where loyalty, betrayal, and retribution were all measured like test results. In some villages, people began to see the sky as cursed. The drones weren't just machines, they were watchers. According to a 2010 UN field report, Afghan farmers described the constant buzzing as a spirit that decides who lives or dies. In this war lab, fear was part of the formula. The lab kept evolving. new weapons arrived. One of them, nicknamed the Vampire Bomb, was a thermobaric device that sucked oxygen from caves. First tested in U.S. deserts, it was dropped on Afghanistan's cave systems in Operation Anaconda. These were not routine deployments. These were experimental detonations. Even civilian aid wasn't safe from experimentation. NGOs, schools, and even mosques were quietly partnered with psychological operations. A 2005 RAND study exposed how human terrain teams were embedded in aid work to gather emotional data. In the lab, charity became surveillance. The experiments extended underground. In Helmand's poppy fields, U.S. and British forces tested new drug interdiction tactics using biometric scanners, artificial intelligence, and financial modeling. According to BBC reports from 2009, entire villages were labeled based on data predictions, not proof. And in the dark, experiments continued. Night raids became data-driven missions. A 2011 report by Amnesty International detailed how families were targeted based on pattern recognition software. No trial, no warning, just a knock at midnight, then silence. Soon, every Afghan face became a data point. The U.S. military began collecting iris scans, fingerprints, and voice prints from thousands of civilians. According to the Pentagon's own Biometric Identity Management Agency, over 2.5 million profiles were created. Not because they were criminals, but because this was a lab, and identity itself was part of the experiment. In some cities, behavior modeling became the next frontier. With funding from DARPA and NATO partners, researchers deployed predictive software to anticipate insurgent activity based on daily routines. As revealed by a 2011 Wired article, Afghan neighborhoods were turned into real-time simulations. Testing didn't stop at technology, it went into emotion. Psychological operations officers dropped leaflets, broadcast fake radio shows, and even staged body burns to provoke reaction. In his field notes from 2009, journalist Sebastian Junger wrote that Afghanistan was the most tested population on Earth. Meanwhile, the lab was expanding upwards. Afghanistan became the launch pad for high-altitude surveillance balloons and solar-powered spy drones. According to a 2012 report by Defense Industry Daily, these systems weren't just tested, they were perfected here. In this strange war, even friendship was measured. NATO forces created loyalty scorecards for village elders, ranking them based on cooperation, speech, tone, and body language. As exposed by The Guardian in 2011, elders were sometimes targeted not for actions but for poor behavioral scores. Afghanistan was also where the U.S. tested battlefield robots. According to a 2008 Pentagon briefing, prototypes like PackBot and Talon were first deployed in real missions here. Engineers monitored how they moved, how they broke, and how enemies reacted. In this lab, war was part machine, part test environment. Control wasn't just physical, it was also psychological. In 2010, WikiLeaks revealed that U.S. forces paid Afghan radio stations to broadcast scripted messages, often pretending to be local voices. Listeners didn't know they were part of an experiment in information warfare. By the mid-2010s, private military contractors outnumbered U.S. troops. These firms tested surveillance tools, data collection apps, and rapid deployment logistics tools that would later be used in other countries. A 2012 Senate report warned, "The lab is running without oversight. Even infrastructure was a weapon." In a 2013 analysis by Foreign Affairs, NATO-backed road projects were used not only for transport, but for control. villages near paved roads were studied for behavior shifts. More support, less insurgency, more market integration. In this lab, concrete had a hypothesis, and perhaps the most invisible experiment of all. Time. The U.S. war in Afghanistan became the longest in American history. But instead of winning or leaving, the strategy became observation. As outlined in the 2014 Rand Corporation Review, Afghanistan offered a rare chance to study how war mutates across generations. By 2015, the Biometric Data Project had become massive. Millions of Afghans had been scanned, tagged, and stored. A leaked U.S. Army document confirmed that even farmers and school children had entries. It wasn't for border control. It was for mapping how identity could be digitized during war. As the U.S. prepared for withdrawal, it launched a new set of experiments, studying what collapse looks like. Defense planning memos from 2016, later obtained by reporters, show that simulations of regime failure, refugee movement, and insurgent surge were all modeled. In real time, on real people. Meanwhile, the private sector had joined the lab. Silicon Valley firms provided facial recognition, drone AI, and even language filtering tools. A 2017 Bloomberg report confirmed U.S. defense tech companies used Afghanistan as a real-time beta fieldware testing didn't happen in labs, but in life. Even as troops pulled out, the experiment didn't end, it evolved. Remote advisors tested how long an allied force could survive with just digital support. According to a 2020 Defense Department review, the Afghan army was monitored like a virtual simulation. Morale levels, battlefield outcomes, loyalty probabilities, all measured in dashboards. In the final months, the withdrawal itself became the test. The U.S. studied exit mechanics, how to remove an empire's infrastructure without triggering global panic. A leaked CENTCOM report described the Kabul airport as a chaotic but controlled burn. Afghanistan's final act was still part of the experiment. When the Taliban entered Kabul in August 2021, they didn't just inherit power, they inherited a digital footprint. Biometric scanners, intelligence databases, and surveillance networks were left behind. As confirmed by the Intercept and MIT Technology Review, the lab wasn't cleaned, it was transferred. In the days after, international observers warned that the test data millions of scanned identities, loyalty reports, family trees could now be used for revenge. As Human Rights Watch reported in September 2021, former interpreters and soldiers were tracked using equipment originally built for U.S. labs. What began as a war ended as a database. According to a 2022 BBC investigation, digital surveillance systems built in Afghanistan were later sold, modified, and tested in Africa, South Asia, and Latin America. The lab didn't close, it expanded. Some said the war was a failure, but in the lab's language, failure is feedback. From drones to biometrics to PSYOPs, each cycle refined the tools. As reported by Defense One in 2022, the real success was the knowledge gained, not the ground held. For the people of Afghanistan, the lab was never a theory. It was the dust in their lungs, the fear in their sleep, the sound of drones at night. As poet Matula Turab once said, "We are not the battlefield. We are the broken experiment." Afghanistan's experiment didn't end at its borders. The technologies tested their biometrics. Drone surveillance, predictive policing soon appeared in Western cities. A 2022 report by the ACLU warned, "The war lab has come home." Even language was tested. Phrases like kinetic action, surgical strike, and collateral damage were crafted to dehumanize the laboratory. As writer George Orwell once warned, war doesn't just kill, it corrupts the way we speak and the way we think. The most chilling part, there were no final results, only ongoing versions. The war was called Forever for a reason. In the lab, time is not measured by victory, but by iteration. Every failed mission became a file, every death a data point. But the people of Afghanistan, those who survived the lab, carry the weight in silence. Whole generations grew up under rotor blades and surveillance skies. Their memories are not policy reports. They are graves, scars, and unanswered prayers. What happened in Afghanistan wasn't a war in the old sense. It was something colder, more systematic, a place where ideas were tested and lives were measured. It wasn't a failure, it wasn't a victory, it was a lab, and the experiment is still running. In 2023, UN agencies found that 90% of Afghans were living under the poverty line. Many of them had seen every version of the lab: Soviet tanks, CIA weapons, drones, and withdrawal. For them, the question is not who won, it's what was left. The lab was global, but the subjects were local. Their names rarely made headlines. Their lives rarely made policy papers. But their bodies absorbed every experiment, every failure, every innovation in modern warfare. Governments called it a campaign. Analysts called it a failure. But behind those terms was a laboratory that ran for 40 years across regimes, technologies, and ideologies. And the test subjects never gave consent, and still, the people survive. They raise children, plant seeds, rebuild walls again and again, as if to say, you can run your experiments, but you will never define who we are. We are not your results. For the world, Afghanistan became a site of lessons. But the greatest lesson is not about drones or data. It's about memory. What we choose to remember and what we choose to erase. The bombs are gone, the data lives on, and the people continue. What happened in Afghanistan cannot be reversed, but it can be recorded. This episode is our witness. This video is our archive. We hope you see what was hidden. Not just a battlefield, but a blueprint. Not just a tragedy, but a timeline of tests. Afghanistan was not just a war, it was a laboratory, and we must never build such a lab again. This has been a story of memory, power, and survival. But above all, it's been a story of people. Unnamed, unarmed, unforgotten. The experiment ends here. The remembrance begins now. From tanks to terminals, from spies to satellites, this was the lab that watched a people rise and fall and rise again. But the final page is not written by generals or algorithms. It's written by those who lived through it. Thank you for watching UncoverTime. Like, share, and subscribe for more journeys through history. This was Afghanistan, not a war, a laboratory. And now, an unforgettable lesson.